America has a long history of racism, dating back to when the early settlers first inhabited America. Native Americans were basically forced off their land and many were killed. Early settlers called the natives savages, and even the ones who converted to Christianity were still segregated from the white people. Around 1619, the first African slaves were brought to Jamestown, Virginia. This began a practice of slavery and racism that would last another 2 decades in America. It wasn't until after the Civil War and the issuing of the Emancipation Proclamation that it became illegal to own slaves. This, however, did not mean that people were treated equally. The end of slavery led to more racism, hatred, and now segregation. Blacks in America were treated as second-rate citizens, and it would take years of court cases like Plessy v. Ferguson and Brown v. the Board of Education before the Civil Rights Act of 1964 would end all state and local laws requiring segregation. It has been almost 50 years since the Civil Rights Act was passed, but has segregation truly ended, and are all people treated equally in America? Sure, no part of America is legally allowed to be segregated, but there are unofficially segregated places all over America. Just look at Philadelphia, for example. We are full of neighborhoods that by law aren't segregated, but still pretty much are. Obviously, there will be no neighborhood that is exclusively made up of one race, but you will find that in many neighborhoods it's either mostly white, black, Hispanic, or Asian. This segregation of neighborhoods then leads to a segregation in schools. You are now having schools that the students are mainly all one race. This leads to issues of bias, such as which schools are receiving the funding they need, which schools have poorer test results, and which schools have the better teachers, and these issues lead to racism and hatred. This is a tough problem to solve because we live in a country that is so divided still. We've taken small steps, and with every generation there seems to be more and more tolerance, but we still do not live in a world free of racism. The number one problem is that our society places too much emphasis on race and not enough emphasis on the fact that we are all members of the human race. One proposed theory to rid society of racism is that of colorblindness. Proponents for this suggest that all racial discrimination of the past be forgotten and erased. Forms should not have us check white or black, but rather just check American. Also, affirmative action should be eliminated along with any other program that makes distinctions based on a person's race. Color blindness enthusiasts argue that so long as the sins of the past remain conscious in the minds of the people will forever be divided. Another theory to combat racism is the economic equality theory. This theory hypothesizes that racial disparity can be cured by elevating minorities to the socioeconomic level that the majority is at. This theory assumes that the real reasons people have issues with another person's race is because of a disconnect caused by the differences in economic success and opportunities for minorities to be successful. This model is different from the colorblindness theory in that affirmative action is necessary to make this work. The interracial theory is another theory to rid society of racism. This theory encourages interracial dating and taking efforts to remove the stigmas associated with it. The logic behind this theory is that if more people were a mixture of multiple races, they would be less likely to discriminate against another race. This theory raises the question, can a person really hate someone of another race if they themselves, their children, or their grandchildren are in some part that race? This theory focuses on the genetics of race, rather than leaving it up to a person's goodwill to see past physical differences. The hope is that one day people are made up of so many different races they are not able to identify with one specific race. It also relies on emotional bonds between families to deter early generation non-mixed person from discriminating against those that are mixed. In order for any of these theories to work, there would have to be cohesion within society. We already know that society can't get along and agree on most issues, let alone race, an issue that has plagued America since its birth. More than likely, racism will always be a factor, not only in America but around the world. A tone has been set long ago by design to keep certain groups in power and leave certain groups as followers. Racism can only be combated on an individual level, by you yourself promoting tolerance and acceptance to your immediate sources of contact, whether this being by using the interracial theory or just practicing colorblindness in your everyday life. Using your actions to help influence those that are ignorant and enlightening them as to why racism, bigotry, and discrimination are destructive, and promoting an overall awareness that these actions only help to support the overall objective, which is to keep society from unifying.